Again, I'm going to start the March 15th, 2022 Town Council meeting. We will be on Zoom tonight. Also, the phone number is 646-558-8656. The ID is 889-9882, 4282 #. So we'll call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call.
Council Honan.
Yes.
Council Fusillo.
Here.
Council Munson.
Here.
Council Belcher.
Here.
Council DeMarco.
Here.
Council Flockhart. Council Aiello.
Here.
Vice President Ruggiero.
Here.
President Lettieri.
Yeah, ask us all to please rise for the pledge led by Council Vice President Ruggiero.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The minutes from March 1st meeting have been distributed. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Councilor DeMarco, second by Councilor Vice President Ruggiero. Any discussion, amendments, deletions? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. General information recommendations. About a year ago, I think, we contracted with the Abrams Group for a much anticipated water study on our water rates and enterprise funds. They did a very thorough job, and tonight here with us, we have Mark Abrams from the Abrams Group, and we also have Ryan Trahan, who will be giving a presentation. Does the council, town manager like to say anything before we begin?
No, obviously, I took up this project. They were contracted back in February of 2021. I took this project up probably after June of 2021, and we've kind of pushed it through the final completion of this project. I believe the DPW director had submitted a correspondence to the council as well. And again, a meeting with environmental partners and Mark Abrams yesterday, as well as their support staff who did the study for well over an hour. I'm confident that we come to the same conclusions. Just how do we get to those conclusions that are a little bit different? And assumptions have to be made in every study that is done. And what some assumptions do you really want to validate? Because you have to validate your assumptions and come to conclusions to where we move forward from. So I think that's the key to the differences between the two different reports, one from Environmental Services and one from our DPW director who manages the water. No one's gonna stand here today and say that we don't need to work on certain procedures in place, and also a capital plan to address more fully the water needs of the community and how we capture unaccounted for water. So I appreciate both working with Mark as well as Ryan over the many months to get this project to completion. I'm happy it's at completion, and I think after the presentation tonight, you have to answer any questions, but we should then start to figure out what's our capital plan for the water and sewer account. Again, you're not gonna recapture every single ounce of water that you're losing. Every community has water loss. This is, what's the balance are you comfortable with? What rate do you want? What repairs do you want? And I think that's the major thing to keep in mind as we move through this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan?
Yes, thank you very much, and welcome, and thank you for having me. And I think the town manager said it really well, is that this comes down from two different angles. And first, let me back up and just introduce myself. So I'm a senior principal of Environmental Partners. I've been doing this type of work for over 20 years. With me over Zoom, just to answer if there's any detailed technical questions, I have Adam Cran with Environmental Partners, a project manager. And this is done in conjunction with Abrams Group, so as town manager said, Matt is here as well today in person to answer any questions on that sense. But first, in our agenda slide, if you all have copies of our presentation.
We're bringing it up on the screen
Okay.
as we speak. Thank you, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I'm going to try to use tonight as much of an education about the process of what happens with studying water systems, but also some nice recommendations, which I think would be generally in agreement as well with the town manager said.
Yeah, it's just not responding.
That's me.
There you go.
Yeah. I don't know why it's not opening slideshow.
Maybe just keep this one, the slides. Yeah,
Yeah.
just go to slides.
Okay, is that sufficient for me to continue? Okay.
Try to get the full screen.
All right, cool.
All right. So slide 3, I don't think anyone needs to see my photo again, but after slide 3, we have just the topics for today, just generally the scope that we followed, some of our findings, and then general recommendations. And then slide 4, what we wrote here is just generally the scope of work that was included. And I think I just want to use this opportunity to kind of explain to you why top-down water audits are really done. And it's really just to kind of, it's almost like a desktop study to really just evaluate a water system and almost independently, just taking what's water that's going in, water that's being used, and finding out where this is happening. So you take, and this process follows American Water Works procedures that's widely adopted throughout the United States. There's an entire manual if you're interested in, it's called the M36 manual, and there's a free audit software as well that the American Water Works puts out and updates regularly so that water systems across the United States can have access to it and use it to improve their systems. So we've looked at everything in the report from customer meters, meter sizes and age, the end of array meter calibration records, the potential, and reviewed the information on how unmetered water was consumed through fire protection, hydrant flushing, having to move water in the storage tanks and other hydrant use. We looked at the leak detection program and how much leaks were actually found, and then what other real losses there were on the system. And we took all those leaks that were sent to us, we had put through those on a map as well to try to see if we could correlate any specific direct areas in town of where those leaks were occurring. So maybe there'd be, it'd be an easy answer, an easy fix. You could just say, go replace this water main.
Recording in progress.
But then we got down into, and we also looked at the annual statistics reports as well, and unaccounted water for applications. And just when we're going to say losses and unaccounted for water, there's just different terminology that American Water Works uses versus Mass DEP. So we kind of use those interchangeably. So if you hear me speaking about both or Steve speaking about both, it's really kind of talking about the same thing. Next slide. So next up is the water balance. This is generally, everything pretty much comes in from the MWRA, right? You purchased almost 472 million gallons in 2020. So that is what is supplied to the system. And what's left, you have about 352 million of those gallons were metered or authorized to be consumed. The other 120 million gallons was losses or not recognized. And the water loss of 120.709 gallons represents about 25%. And I just want to kind of give a little education as well about what does that mean for a water system and other water systems either in this area and across Massachusetts. So generally speaking, Mass DEP generally has a rule of thumb or a guideline that you should generally be between 10 and 15% unaccounted for water. It is absolutely normal to not being able to account for every single gallon that's coming in or is being pumped into your system. For a lot of history, most municipalities up until maybe say 2000 and 2005 had between 15 and 20%. Mass DEP has slowly been ratcheting down that requirement based upon new technology that's been able to identify leaks. We have some other neighboring communities that we've done a water audit for as well. MWRA community, aging infrastructure, almost the same exact unaccounted for water percent too. So it's not just a problem that Winthrop is having. A lot of the towns and cities around the Boston area are dealing with aging infrastructure. it's not possible to identify every single leak in the system. You know, there could be little pinhole leaks all over the system that you just don't know about. So hopefully through tonight, we'll kind of give you some understanding about how best to kind of go about identifying that and prioritizing some improvements for the system. Next slide. So this slide summarizes what are those water losses, what are they? So real losses are essentially leaks, water main breaks, and apparent losses are those that are through inaccuracies, through metering or unauthorized consumption, data handling errors. I mean, there's a wide range that can fall into that category. Now keep in mind, Terry mentioned assumptions, right? Sometimes the water audit software, because this is a high-level study, they have different parameters that you have to input for confidence level of the data you're receiving. And it automatically assigns a certain percent of those total losses to assign to a certain category, okay? So we need to realize too, as we go through this, that this is a general understanding and overview of where these could be possibly filling into the different cans of losses, so that we can properly make sort of recommendations about how to proceed. Next. So this is where we get into a little bit of the cost of the losses. So the left-hand column with the large blue bar chart is, all that adds up to about 130 million gallons a year, which is right now is being called as losses to the system. And on the right-hand side is what the program, after inputting some of the water rates and what you're paying for water, what ends up giving out for how much water is being lost per year. Okay, so a couple things to clarify here, because that number looks pretty big, right? Again, you know, that's at the 25% level. So no matter what you're doing, you're never ever going to get down to 0%. So you need to understand that at a minimum, you're going to be looking at least half to 40% of that value of being water that's just purchased but just lost due to the infrastructure that you have. Okay? So that has to be recognized as well. Second is sometimes that the way that the software recognizes metering inaccuracies is it runs it through your rate structure as well. So that's why the red on the right-hand side is much higher. Okay. In reality, you're actually paying the raw rate that you're purchasing water from the MW rate too. So that the total cost of what you're actually losing per year is not that one full million gallons per year. Okay, so this is why sometimes with this type of analysis, you have to kind of provide some clarification of what each of these components means. Next slide. So a part of the unaccounted for water percent essentially is a formula of just taking what water you're purchasing, how much water is being metered, and then what else is confidently estimated. And Steve obviously has in detail in his annual statistics reports each year. You have to provide, this report goes into Mass DEP, you have to provide a breakdown of estimated water use that not necessarily was metered, because there's uses every day that are used for fire protection out of hydrants, which isn't metered. Any flushing that's going on in the streets to maintain chlorine residual, to maintain water quality in the system, which is paramount, which is also Mass DEP required as well. Sometimes you have to move water into storage tanks in the winter to prevent icing, or in the summer to improve chlorine residual. And also water main breaks, right? You may have seen water spouting out of the ground. It's pretty hard to meter that. So you just do your best you can to try to estimate the rate at which it's coming out, how long it was flowing for, and then try to pinpoint that with some information of the water that was being purchased through the meter at that time. So all those sort of add up to what we call confidently estimated municipal use, and that is subtracted from the unaccounted for water or losses in the formula. So, you know, looking through the information, what we found for data that was provided to us was very similar to other DPW's municipalities. You know, I could go to every client I have and tell them that they need to do a better job of record keeping, you know, because it's just, you know, with the amount of people and resources and the demands of running a water system and a sewer system every day. But there's some forms and uses that could be done to improve record keeping, and I think even help increase the amount of estimated use there is to help reduce those water losses. So I'll show you a little bit, but there's actually a percentage of all this that are just losses that aren't identified through leaks that we think are in some of these categories that are just kind of out there but not being accounted for. Next slide, please. So leak detection, so I think the last survey that was part of this study was in 2020. We think it was about 14 million gallons per year that was identified as leaks. And our recommendations through here are mostly, obviously, to continue doing your leak detection. You know, if you keep finding them, they're probably still out there. Trying different types of technology. You know, the technology with leak detection companies is evolving. There's even some meters now that, or different types of items that you can install in the distribution system to listen for leaks constantly. Pros and cons of those obviously are out there, but there's different technology and different breadth of leak detection capabilities that you could apply, but it's also investing the money that it takes to actually do a leak detection either annually, or if you keep finding those leaks, doing it twice a year. Okay. Just to let you know, if your unaccounted water is at acceptable levels, Mass DEP only recommends you do it once every 2 years. Okay, so there is a guideline that the DPW is doing it more so than what's required by DEP right now, but I think they're staying on top of it. The other important thing here too is just to keep in mind that leak detection is a big topic, especially with aging cast iron water mains. Especially in a coastal area, you know, you can tend to get some corrosive soils with what you have, if you have groundwater and saltwater intrusion, that can really cause the soils to become corrosive. Salt water can really eat away at the outside of a cast iron pipe or ductile iron pipe. And so using the leaks that were mapped, I think there's a map in the report, and through another capital improvement program, identifying where those areas in town which have really corrosive soils, those could be prioritized for water main replacement. So if you find a section of town that may have highly corrosive soils, and you also had a couple leaks on that main, that would bring that right up to the top of the list of investing money into replacing that water main. Okay, so that's one of the recommendations, is to invest in a capital improvement plan, focus on those kind of low-lying areas or areas near the coast, and then that way you can really identify and prioritize how much money you should be spending in replacing that infrastructure. And the capital plan will actually lay out how much you spent per year over 5, 10, 15 years to start eliminating and improving the infrastructure. Next slide, please. So this is what I mentioned before, the leak documentation. We provided a form that American Water Works recommends. And so I think going forward, I think that'll help identify when it was witnessed, when it was reported, when it was fixed, and also be able to provide a solid estimate on identifying how much water actually was found. Because if you think about it, you know, you go do leak detection, you have generally real no idea how long that leak was going for, right? When you dig up and fix it, you can kind of estimate at the rate of what it was leaking at, but it's really hard to quantify how long was that leaking for. So there's ways that you can do it with continued leak detection and really trying to pinpoint the timeline to help really estimate how much you're actually losing through each year. Thanks. The other thing that we saw too is that done a good job of replacing meters, but obviously COVID sort of interrupted getting into people's homes and finishing up the meter replacement program. We definitely recommend finishing, I think there's about 1,000 left, Steve?
Yeah, 1144 at this point.
About 1,000 meters or so, and getting those completed, it would help reduce some of the estimated reads, and I believe some of the meters that on the residential side that Steve is putting in now are more accurate than what the meters are that are being in the system that are currently in the older meters. What we found too is that usually some clients will prefer, when they do in a meter replacement program, they would prefer to save money and try to do their meter replacement in-house and just do a certain number per year. But in actuality, you know, if you think about the loss of the accuracy of the meters, you may actually be losing money each year if you don't just rip the Band-Aid off and replace all the meters, hire a contractor to do that. So it's just something to contemplate down the road when you have to do the next meter replacement program. The other aspect of this too is the larger meters. You know, those are your biggest registers in the system for your largest customers. Going in and calibrating those, replacing those every 10 years, I think would be, you get the biggest bang for the buck on making sure that you're accounting for all the water that's being used for each large user. And the last thing I have on that slide too is making sure that, you know, there's a lot of times what we found is that you go into a meter pit or, you know, in the basement, and you find out that that meter is well oversized for the type of use that's right currently in the building. Well, if you oversize a meter, it tends not to measure the lowest flow. So if you put a 1 inch meter in, 1.5 inch meter, you may not be able to read down to half gallon a minute, which if you just, you know, turn on your faucet to brush your teeth, that's not gonna be measurable, okay? So if someone or apartment building is doing that on a regular basis, you'd be losing that revenue, and it's not being accounted for. So that's something that we recommend as part of the replacement program for the larger meters. Next slide, thanks. Some other recommendations, as part of the capital program is investing in some asset management work and transitioning a lot of the records into GIS. I think that it would go very well, and I think, I'm sure Steve would agree, but having all the data at your fingertips on an iPad or something, the ability to have all your records, to understand where the leaks are in your system, are they mapping in the same location? Does that help prioritize a replacement program to move that water main section up to the top of the list? So that, I think, will help document and track, you know, the entire system, what's going on, and really help out. And usually some clients will actually partner with doing an asset management plan with their capital improvement plan as well, so that it can be done at the same time. And I think I mentioned here, again, it's just, as part of that program, then potentially doing some soil testing and seeing if there are some areas of highly corrosive soils which could exacerbate deterioration of the exterior of the pipe wall, which can lead to some pinhole leaks and bigger leaks. Next slide. So I think this is my final slide. I think this pretty much highlights everything I've talked about. So documentation, improving on the estimated uses, leak reporting, leak detection, trying to use different vendors and different techniques, prioritizing getting the meter replacement program finished, focusing on a larger meter, a calibration and repair program, looking at right sizing those meters when they come up, and then doing a targeted capital improvement program. A lot of the losses that we saw here were really associated with leaks, and more so than anything else. So I think that really points to the need to invest some money into replacing some of the aging water mains and infrastructure in town. So that's all I had. Any questions?
Thank you, I appreciate it. We're gonna go around for the councilors to ask questions. I just wanna thank you, first of all. And I'll start off with just a couple questions. One is, one discussion that we've had is the major meter, right, coming in from the MWRA. And we've always been told it's pretty substantial investment to look into changing that. Is that something, I mean, I didn't see you really address it. Is that something that has any validity in changing, or is it more that they're responsible for calibrating on a regular basis? If you could talk a little bit about that for us.
Sure. I mean, I've had some clients ask me too, of like, what happens if we put in a redundant meter pit next to, you know, with the MWRA is, and constantly check it. Well, you can do that. However, you just have to buy into the maintenance of the meter, the calibration of the meter, and you know, double checking and making sure if you're doing your calibration, they're doing their calibration, and you're comparing it, and if it's off by a vast amount, it'll be turn into a he said, she said argument. But it's not a small investment to make, and but I've seen some clients do it. Some have been introduced to that topic and have said it's not worth the aggravation. You know, MWRA did send us the calibration records with the pitot tests. We did point out to MWRA that they weren't doing the pitot tests as frequently as they should. That's still the power that we have, I guess, is not, you know, coming from our perspective to the MWRA is not as strong, I guess. But it would be, and generally speaking, they kind of count their accuracy, the meter being within accurate results of being within 5%, so plus or minus. So keep that in mind. If they go out and do a test and it's 95% or 105%, then that means that they feel it's accurate and they're going to let it go, because the calibration can actually fluctuate.
And the last question I'll ask, and I'll open it up and then I'll come back, but on metered water, like so you talked a little bit about like fire hydrants and stuff like that that aren't metered, right? Are there cities and towns, are we pretty much in good shape in terms of what we have metered? Are there things that should be metered that aren't metered?
I think in the report, we brought up, what happens is on water main replacement, sometimes you have to do bypass piping on the street, okay? It is extremely hard to try to meter that type of flow, and I think there's a base, just a base charge that gets charged to the customer for the period. But it's a real headache to try to meter each property. I'd have to defer to Steve if they put a meter at the top of the hydrant to feed the bypass main or not, but that's what I would recommend, but maybe they're already doing that.
We don't do that. Again, just to go back to so it's always been policy, town policy, when we do meter replacements, just to put them on bypass and charge them the minimum fee. It can be estimated. If you put those hydrant meters on, one, they're expensive to purchase. They're susceptible to theft, vandalism. For the short duration of those mains being in place, you probably don't recoup the cost of it. And they restrict flow, so they do restrict, potentially restrict fire flow out of because you have temporary hydrants on those water mains. So there's reasons why we don't use it. It's been a policy. It can certainly change. We can certainly start estimating those houses. I think the feeling for the past administrations has been, these people are inconvenienced by the project. It is an improvement. They don't really see it as their improvement, but it is an improvement for the community, and it's probably going to be an estimated bill. And we all know that estimated bills get usually rejected by customers, so that's how we do it at this point.
I'll go back and forth, so it's fair for everyone. I'll start with Vice President Ruggiero for questions.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work you've done. I know this is something that we've been talking about for at least the past 2 years that I've been sitting on this body, and so it's great to finally have some sort of clarity from a third party. That said, I just want to go back to a couple things that you mentioned. You said that, and just correct me if I'm wrong, our water loss right now is estimated at 20%? 25, okay. And the Mass DEP is recommending between 10 and 15% to be considered acceptable?
It's a general rule of thumb, so some public water suppliers are required to if they have their own sources, have essentially a water management permit that they have to abide by. And in that permit, there's conditions associated with meeting a certain unaccounted for water percent. So your consecutive system to the Untitled, they may have other regulations, but generally the rule of thumb is about 15%.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that in coastal communities, closer to salt water, older communities like Winthrop, there's another sort of threshold. Did you put a number on that? What some like a similar city or town like us?
Yeah,
what their water loss would be?
I mentioned that there's a similar, not a city that's real coastal, but another, Boston suburb that was in the 25% range. That they're had maybe even older infrastructure, about the same, and we're an Untitled community as well, and they had about the same unaccounted for water. So
Okay.
they're kind of going through the same exercises as you are, trying to identify how much do we need to spend on main replacement work.
Sure. Okay. Okay. Good. That's helpful. Now, in terms of the larger metered customers, that's one thing I have in my notes here. You said those should be replaced sort of more regularly. Can you give us an example, maybe without naming specific, property owners or addresses, but what is a specific of a large customer, a larger meter, are sort of high volume users?
Inch and a half and above.
Yeah.
And
Considered a large meter.
so what is that? Is that town hall? Is that
Town hall, governor's condos,
okay?
things like that.
Apartment buildings, condominiums, schools, not, you know, single-family home.
Right, single-family homes are typically 5/8 to an inch.
Okay, got it. And, let me see.
And what you usually would do is take your meter list and take your highest users for consumption and kind of sort them and see, you know, because you could have someone with a 2-inch meter who's the highest user, but then have someone with a 6-inch meter who's a low user. So you just have to balance the investment you make and put the money in the right location.
Got it, okay. So on to sort of like the leak detection map. That was one thing that was in the appendix of the report that you sent to us. I think it was on the slideshow as well. But just to clarify for myself and everyone here, but those were pre-identified leaks that the town had already taken a look at, identified, fixed. And so the point of that map is to just look for a trend, correct? It's not to say there's an active leak right here and you should investigate it.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
we try to look at historic correlation to see, you know, if that map pulled up and there was, all the leaks were on like one small section of town, then you could know that that would be definitely an area of investigation, but considering that it was pretty spread out, but it was kind of it was kind of on the coastal areas, that's what kind of came to the idea about the corrosive soil nature.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there is not necessarily a trend there for us to unfortunately. Okay. The one thing too, on the chart that was presented, it said that, you know, it was a bar graph and there was an influx of meters from the year 2000. And then it seemed like we had a big gap in between where I'm guessing we replaced a bunch of meters and then a smaller amount. There's what are we, these are 22-year-old meters. Have we identified what properties these are on? And is it because of COVID that, you know, those were kind of caught in the backswing, or I guess that's a question for the DPW director through the town manager and also the firm, but.
So I can tell you, sitting with Meredith at the EOC, we stopped all home inspections
Okay,
as well as meter replacements during the really high swings of COVID.
sure,
We wanted to know, you know, and police officers were meeting people outside their homes. So there was a period of time where we did stop.
okay,
Now, I know there's Steve said about 1,145.
1,144 old-style meters still in place. But what you're seeing in that bar is,
Yep.
we started our meter replacement project in 2014.
okay,
We went after the big meters first.
Yep.
And that was done in the first year. And then from 2014 until present, we've been replacing, you know, smaller meters, the household meters, you know, 5/8 to an inch. Chose to do it in-house at a time when we had better staffing.
sure,
That's, obviously, we know where we are right now with staffing,
right,
but we saved, the reason we went in-house is it was a $2 million cost, somewhere between $1.5 to $2 million cost. We did put it out on RFQ to have installers put those meters in.
okay,
Town opted to save that money and do it in-house. So
Okay.
that's why it's taken, you know, the better part of 8 years to do. But that's an investment, a capital decision. Do you want to make that investment, have a vendor do it in 6 months to a year, as opposed to what we did?
got it. And, you know, that sort of ties me into my last and final point for now, and we, you know, obviously, I'm sure, some of my questions will be asked by some of my colleagues, but, you know, what I didn't see or we didn't really hear about was what is the dollar amount that we would need to sit here and make a decision on to sort of fix some of these issues, whether that's replacing these old style meters or updating the technology to enhance our record keeping capabilities. So those are the questions and the facts and figures that I think we would kind of need next so that we can make a decision. You know, spending money and budgeting for something is values. And so is this something that we're gonna value? Is this something that we're gonna commit to? And so having those figures would obviously help us make those decisions moving forward. But I think too, after reading this, a lot of folks in the community, you know, David, the $1 million question, metaphorically, $1 million question is, why is my water bill so much higher than X, Y, or Z city or town? What I would like to see, and I think would be helpful, was almost like a simple pie chart that shows for every dollar that I spend on water, you know, 25 cents of it goes to you know, paying for infrastructure, or another 25% of it goes to a reserve where, you know, in case there's a water main break, we can deploy those funds. Another, and then, you know, ultimately, whatever, 50 cents, whatever's remaining, that's the amount of water that you're actually consuming, and that's how much it's paid for. So having a graphic, some sort of chart that is just easily broken out, that shows my $1 pays for this, this, and this, I think that would be helpful for the community as well. And I think these are all great ways to sort of enhance and stop the water loss, but I'm not sure if that necessarily answers the question as to why our bill is higher than other cities and towns on the MWRA system. I will just make that final point and obviously listen around and as my other counselors ask questions. But.
All right, and before I'll go to Councilor Honan next. Just quick point, we talk about 1,100 meters still need to be replaced. We started to, can we just give for the citizens how many meters we started with that? How many meters do we have in the town?
4,526.
Okay. And on Councilor Vice President Rogerio's last statement too, even in the budget, we could see a breakdown of, you know, debt service and fixed expenses and payroll and water assessments and sewer assessments and stuff. And we could pretty easily, I think, get a pie chart for that, which I think is really relative because it gets back to the point where, like, there's a project coming on Councilor Aiello's area pretty soon that's gonna be about $1 million project, right? Water project. And how many feet of?
3,300 feet.
3,300 feet. So say that's 3/4 of a mile, and say we have, you know, roughly 30 miles of older infrastructure left. You know, it gives you an idea. It's about a, you know, a $30-odd million nut, and then you
57
look
million
at,
in today's cost.
and then you look at the debt service of that. But let me go to Councilor Honan, please.
Sure. So what Stephen was saying about the pie chart, you know, with that pie chart, I'd also like to see, and I'm sure he implied this, was that I'd like to see how much of the customer metering inaccuracies each metered customer is paying for, because it sounds like the customer metering inaccuracies are a significant portion of the money that's costing the town. I'm a little confused by slide 7. I know you attempted to explain the difference between the total volume, millions of gallons per year. That blue section, which is the real losses, is a significant amount of gallons per year, you know, versus the red section of volume, which is the customer metering inaccuracies. But then that graph flips and indicates that the customer metering inaccuracies are costing us much more, even though the millions of gallons are far exceed. I don't understand that chart.
It's because the way that the software works is that if they say it's due to this inaccuracy, what it does is it runs it through the rate structure, what residents are paying, customers are paying, versus what you're paying them for the rate. So the blue is mostly, you know, if they're calling it a loss due to a leak, it's not really making its way to a meter, you're losing it into the ground, right? So but you had to pay that to the MWRA, versus the water's being delivered to the customer, they're using it, but maybe it's not being recorded or registered due to inaccuracies or it being too old. So that's why they rate it there. So when I said that the $1 million, like we have to keep, you know, quote unquote $1 million, because it's running it through the rate structure as if it's unbilled, right? So where technically all you're really paying is the water that's coming through the MWRA meter at that cost.
So in other words, that around $700,000 is being divided up and put into everybody's bill based on these inaccurate meters.
Well, I would say that, you know, you'd have to run it through almost a rate. If you really want to see what what you're actually paying for, you'd have to run it through the rate that you're paying at the MWRA. And then that would give you more representation. And then it goes back to my argument too as well, is that you're always going to have leaks no matter what. And inaccuracies, it's the way the water system works with infrastructure. So there's always going to be a portion of this chart that's always going to be there no matter what.
Right. And I'm not so concerned about the leaks. I was really taken aback by the number of zero read meter bills and negative read meter bills. So in other words, the number of people in Winthrop that are paying nothing for their water, or, you know, negative.
That's not accurate. That's not accurate. So those are estimated, they become estimated bills.
Yeah.
When they show up as a zero, we don't not bill them, or we don't deduct money, you know, it becomes an estimated bill. You go out, you identify what the problem is, typically, usually it's, you know, it's an issue with the transmitter on the side of a building, someone was doing siding, or what the case may be, zero bills. Winthrop has a large portion of the community that goes away in the wintertime, so those zero bills, they get verified, you know, they actually, is anybody in the home? Is it an active home? So
Can that be verified? Like, can we as a council get a list of those properties to see trending of, you know, to see whether or not those are actually people that go away, or are they consistently, you know, zero reads over a number of seasons or a number of quarters? That's something I'd really like to see and look closer or deeper into the data. You know, I was just alarmed by these negative and zero reads and how many of them there were. And are we equating, or can we equate those negative and zero read meters with the ones that needs to be replaced? I mean, are those 580 meters that are giving zero reads, are some of those, or all of those, the ones that need to be replaced?
it's closer to 300. But yeah, a lot of them are on older meters, and, you know, but a lot of it is that we have a radio read system, so we don't go out and manually, have to go out and manually read. That was an investment to, you know, for manpower purposes. But, you know, now we have the transmitter that goes to the collector, and it comes back to us in real time. You know, so they're not, again, we're not, you know,
Right, they're rounded up and they're paying something.
unless they're, and if they're verified that there was zero use, then yeah, you know, it gets made up in the next bill.
So could we see the data? Could we see, you know, say, the data where, you know, I'm seeing somebody's, these 500 zero reads or negative reads? I'd like to see, you know, if it's across a year, if it's across 4 quarters, you know, if it's year after year, if it's sudden, if they're actually one of the, on the list to be replaced. Could we get a copy of that raw data?
It's in every commitment. I mean, that's a town manager's decision. But yeah, it's every commitment, every billing commitment, you know, has a totalized actual bills and estimated bills.
Okay.
And then you can look into those estimated bills and you can see, is it zero read? Is it no signal? Is it, you know,
And we could look at the actual
Okay.
addresses so that we could get kind of maybe a geographic.
that'll be the town manager's decision.
Yeah, you know, as long as it's permissible to share. I mean, again, some public records are not, and some public records are. Law enforcement homes are excluded from the public records law for reasons, so we certainly run it through and provide the documents that you requested that we're able to share. But again, I just want to, you know, be mindful. The legislative and administrative branches are in the charter for a reason. And as long as we can, you know, share it, keep those rules in mind, I don't mind sharing.
Thank you.
Just to let you know too, this is a common problem with every water system. Battery issues, transmitter issues, bills get estimated, they get followed up, they get flagged, followed up with a work order, the staff goes out, fixes it. And it sounds from what Steve mentioned that it's a consistent approach to other water suppliers.
Council Flockhart. Council Fusillo?
No questions.
Council Ayala?
Thank you. And again, thank you for the work. I'm gonna start with a question I don't want you to answer initially, because I'm gonna explain it, and then I just want a yes or no, and there'll be no follow-up. This is just my years of experience with auditors in large organizations, which is, so I'll tell you the question, and then I'm gonna describe why I'm asking it, and then you can answer it. Have you experienced any lack of cooperation, any intimidation, or anything unprofessional as you try to perform this audit? The reason I'm asking that is from years ago, I was trained that nobody in any organization, public or private, likes to see an outside auditor come in under any circumstances and look underneath the covers, right? So I want to make sure that you were able to perform your duties without any of those problems. Can you affirm that that's true?
Yes, it's true. Yeah, no,
Okay, great.
they were receptive to the request for information. We had multiple Zoom meetings. And my staff met with Steve and his billing clerk probably at least 3 times, is my guess.
Great, that's encouraging, so that's good to hear. Couple of questions on On page 9, you had a graphic that, as I understood it, that evaluated us on one of the metrics as being, I guess, in the lower 10% of the average of all of the water systems in Massachusetts. Is that what that is representing? Or how am I reading that? It was the
So
circle, the circle
is
on
it
the
slide
left.
9?
Yeah, slide 9.
Yeah, so slide 9 is essentially looks like a speedometer almost, which shows the percentile on how much real losses there are per gallon per mile per day. And this is throughout the United States for comparison, so just to let you know. So there are lots of communities in New England that are in this percentile because of how old the infrastructure is as compared to out in the west, where it's fairly new within the last 50 years or so. So it's not surprising. We had another similar client that was in the same ballpark.
So therefore, the other contextual statistic is if DEP is recommending 10 to 15%, let's call that 12.5%, and we're at 25%, we're sort of at double water losses than what is recommended. That is also pretty consistent among older communities, or is that unusual?
I can say we've done one water audit for a similar community. They were about the same 25% mark, and you know, there are some towns that have 5%. There are some towns that have 15%, some 18, some 20, some 11. So it's all over the mark. And but most of the time, the correlation is the older the town, the older the infrastructure, the higher the percent of losses.
All right, thanks, helpful. On page 11, we looked at the replacement meter rate. That seemed to begin a decline in 2018 and 2019 before COVID hit. Was that because of budgetary constraints, or what was the reason behind the drop-off in meter changeouts? If you look at that bar graph on page 11.
Any question for me or him?
I don't know, whoever can answer that question. It doesn't matter to me.
Staffing,
Staffing.
priorities, fortunately, yeah.
Okay, lack of budget as well?
Well, I mean, we have all the meters, so it's not that we couldn't purchase meters.
Yeah.
So no, I wouldn't say
Okay.
that. I mean, lack of budget for manpower, I guess, yeah, if you wanna go that direction.
So my last question, I just want to put cost of cure versus the cost of what we've been experiencing. So you took a sample of 1 year. I'm assuming, this is back to the auditors, that this is a set of losses that has been going on for some time now, maybe getting worse, maybe getting better, but this is not sort of a one and done year. And we're likely facing, if we don't change how we're doing what we're doing and the pace of what we're doing it, we're likely to experience continued losses over a period of time until we get to the right place. I think one dimension of it, I think the town council president tried to put an estimate on of a $30 million CapEx roughly, and then you had a different, did you have a different number?
Yeah, 30 million is low. To replace the remaining water main,
Yeah.
you're in the vicinity of about 57 million.
It's about
In
50,
today's,
in
that's
today's
assuming
dollars,
about $400 a linear foot is
Yeah.
what we're seeing.
yeah, okay. If you were to add to that, there were a series of recommendations about improving the management systems, a GIS-based database tied to the capital improvement plan, and then obviously uploading all the data onto it would be a one-time initial big surcharge. What's the estimated cost in your mind for a town like Winthrop to be able to purchase that system, populate that system, and put that system into good, stable practice so that it would then feed directly into the budgetary processes?
Well, it'd be tough for me to estimate the GIS platform, considering I'm not sure what the IT has here existing or any GIS functionality throughout the town now. But just from a
Probably minimal, you should guess.
Honestly, on the GIS platform aspect of it, I'd be hesitant to throw out a cost, but I think for some local places that specialize sort of in municipalities, you're looking at maybe an upfront cost of $25,000 and then a maintenance annual maintenance cost of maybe $5,000 to $10,000, but it all depends upon different modules you use, so please use that loosely. And the capital plan, asset management plan can be anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000, depending upon the scope of work. Are you gonna do the soil boring program? Are you gonna be doing soil testing, or, you're not, you're just gonna do modeling and look at different areas of town for water mains? That's pretty minimal, but if you go the full extent, it can range in price.
Okay. So those are the prices for the software, and then getting the data that exists in the paper files and moving it into those systems is another one-time cost. It's very heavily people-oriented, right?
Yes.
So big labor costs, I
Yes,
would
yes.
assume as well,
Yeah,
right?
it'd be
So,
a staffing resource.
so I don't want to put you in, but I'm just trying to get order of magnitude for the size of the problem and putting us in a better position so we have true management systems here. If you were to consider all elements of doing further testing and about buying the software, putting into place, training people, and then populating the data into it, so migrating that data, I'm gonna put a number out, you tell me you think we're crazy or not, 350,000,
That's probably about.
probably in the area, okay, that's helpful. I'll pass
For now? Sure,
next.
yeah, we'll come back. Councilor Munson.
Thank you, Council President Lettieri. Thank you for coming, and thank you for explaining yourself. There are a few basic questions, just kind of like some terms that I'm trying to figure out, and your math. Can you explain on slide 22 how you came to the $232 per connection cost due to water losses?
Slide.
You're talking on the original?
Oh, on the original report.
Oh,
And it's page 22, not
Page.
slide. But I'm just basically looking to get the math explained. How did you come to $232 per connection? I'm assuming that is per connection, and that's 4,526 connections. And of those, the average cost due to water loss is $232 per year. Am I accurate in saying that? And that's,
yeah, I'd have to find the page for the specific reference. 22.
Is that an attachment? One of the attachments must be in the attachment, because it only goes up to 12 in the regular report.
Is this the page you're looking at?
yes, it is.
Okay. Do you mind repeating your question so I can look at your?
Can you explain your math on how you came to the number of cost per connection, per household, shall I say, in Winthrop to be $232 per household due to water loss? How did you get that number?
That would be a question for Adam, because he stepped through the report. I'm not sure if that was an estimate for this area and geography, or if it was taken from a pull-down menu, because with this software, there's certain values that you pull in for assignments geographically, so it may be something that was fit into the program already.
Well, I took it as a direct Winthrop thing, and I was just assuming that you took the $1.1 million loss, assumed or estimated water loss, and then you divided that by the number of connections, which is around 4,526. And I just wanted to make sure that was how you got the math.
We do have Adam on the Zoom. If we-
Oh, there he is. Yeah, you're showing up pretty big.
Yeah, I see that, I can see that. Yeah, so all the numbers on those pages, or on that page is automatically calculated by the AWWA water profit software based on the inputs. So if you want.
For Winthrop.
For Winthrop. So the inputs, if you look at in kind of the attachment, inputs are all on page 2 of that attachment. There's one page where you enter in blue boxes, the data specific system. And then based off the data you put in there, it gives all these parameters, or all these results, on that dashboard. And the background data comes from, as Ryan mentioned earlier, placeholder.
So is it safe to say that you basically took the total water loss and divided it by the number of connections?
I have to double check the definition of that specific
Okay.
performance indicator, but that
comes to about the right amount, so I'm just making sure. I'm also wondering how you, are these ratings here, these key performance indicators on the same page? It shows that we're in the 90th percentile in total loss cost rate, apparent loss cost rate, real loss cost rate, and then we're also pretty low on the unit total losses, unit apparent loss. Are these based on Boston metro town municipalities, or is it the state averages? How are you getting the 90th? How are you ranking us? Who are we being ranked and compared to?
Yeah, so this is nationwide. So these are systems all over the country from Massachusetts to California, and that are in the AWWA database. And so when you look at that and you look at basically any community on MWRA water, a lot of the cost indicators are really high.
Okay.
That's what we've seen when we've done these for MWRA. So that's why all of those are basically at 90%. The others are a little more, I'd say, representative of, are kind of more independent of that fact.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't realize that we were being compared to the country.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So we're considered an antiquated infrastructure. What does that mean exactly? Does that mean that anything under 30 years is antiquated, or how do you judge that?
Well, there's certain useful lives of different types of pipe, and generally speaking, if the infrastructure is unlined cast iron, lined cast iron, PVC, ductile iron, there's certain lifespans associated with those. And getting back to the reason why we mentioned the corrosivity of the soils is that can really reduce the lifetime of a pipe. Where it's buried, you don't know anything's happening to it, it's happening every day, you're losing pipe wall thickness and slowly deteriorates, and then it can develop leaks. And so that can really exacerbate the lifespan of any infrastructure that's iron related, that's not being protected.
So our material is one of many to choose from. Do they now replace them with PVC or plastic pipes? Is that what's happening?
Well, it all depends on where you are, but there's also different corrosion protection you can put on ductile iron pipe as well. Either there's a wrap called a V-Bio product, which is sort of lined with a corrosion inhibitor. We've done studies, because we've done water main projects adjacent to, in Eastham on the Cape, right in salt water, and have done studies with the Ductile Iron Pipe Research Association that shows, that works versus just having it buried, without any protection. So.
Is it so, based on the fact that you guys are comparing us to the rest of the country, that would make me assume that you guys do audits like this around the country?
No, we do work specifically in New England, but this software that American Water Works puts out for water audits and the manual that provided and practices is for the entire country.
As far as your company, Environmental Partners, it's not your company per se, is it? You're not the owner, are you?
No.
I didn't think so.
No.
I was just curious because I was just wondering how long the company has been in operation, and just to kind of give us a little backdrop on your company's credibility and expertise. And I don't want to say anything negative. I'm just trying to ask you guys to just give us an explanation of your dossier, your background.
Sure. Yeah, we've been around for 25 years now. We have a staff of about 85. We specialize in municipal infrastructure engineering. With a focus on water and wastewater for towns and cities throughout Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Cape Cod, the islands. So we do anything to do with the water wastewater system for any municipality. We've done a project.
So would you guys not only be the possible contractors for auditing, but also possible contractors to do some of the GIS, the modernization, the leak detection, and some of the actual meter and water main replacement?
So we've done hundreds and hundreds of miles of water main replacement work. I think I've done personally 10, 15, 20, 25 master plans, hydraulic modeling. We have an asset management specialist at our company. We've done water audits for numerous clients. So anything to do with water and wastewater systems, we've done it for our clients based upon what needs they have.
So do audits typically lead to jobs?
It can sometimes they're one-off just studies or whatever is needed at the time for a client. But most of the time, sort of what you have in front of you is that you're uncovering some things that you need to address. And whether or not it's us us or someone that has been here, you know, that's been working with the town that has a lot of history as well, could also probably be considered. But it's all dependent upon the town.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, do you know what the Massachusetts DEP department requires for the meter that's at the gates of Winthrop in terms of how new do they have to be? How often do they need to be updated? And is there anyone that actually can verify if they're accurate besides MWRA themselves?
That's a good question. Adam, you had the data right from MWRA. I'm not sure how, I know you spoke with Mike Reilly directly. It was like pulling teeth, to be honest with you, to try to get the information from them, but they did provide us with an Excel sheet on calibration records.
Yeah, so the scope of what we were looking at was really a desktop evaluation. We weren't going out and observing them doing flow testing and seeing how they were performing and evaluating.
Gotcha.
So this was, as Ryan kind of alluded to earlier, this was top down. This is like first pass, take a look at what's available on paper. So, I mean, it is certainly something that won't consider.
I noticed, and sorry to interrupt, I just don't want to take up too much time. I apologize if I've already taken too much time. But I mean, this report was vast and it was a great read, and I got to enjoy some of your responses to the Capital Asset Management Group. And so I'm looking for, I mean, I look at this ultimately, this conversation and this discussion and this audit as a way to get to a point where we get to an action plan that's pragmatic, effective, and cost efficient. And, you know, I mean, it sounds like, Steve, you're a big supporter of not the top-down study, but a bottom-up study. Can you explain what the difference is there?
Well, the bottom-up study is gonna dive in, so top-down is where you're getting your assumptions and you're seeing areas, but you can't verify them until you're in the field and doing the flow test, and, you know, so it's just a much more thorough, much more cost. I don't know, do you guys typically do bottom-ups as well?
Yeah, we sort of look at that as an approach and kind of lump it in. That's why I kind of mentioned the capital plan, because you can, I guess it depends if losses are the case and you go out and you're putting different monitors throughout the system, you could do something that is extremely focused just on leaks. So that was the idea that we had on the capital plan, but the approach to do the bottom-up is a valid one, as Steve brought up.
It sounds to me like it would be great, as far as an action plan. I mean, I have a few more, but I just thought that it seems to me like getting an exact, or at least a rough idea where the leaks are coming from through a bottom-up study that you're referring to, and then going after those, the larger the leak, the more resources we apply to it. And as opposed to doing a scheduled water main repair, wouldn't that be a sensible game plan as far as that? Steve?
So we are doing it. We're doing our annual leak detection, and most years, you know, we do multiple leak detections. What you gotta remember, what everybody needs to remember, is systems are dynamic. You do a leak detection, it doesn't mean, okay, we captured all our leaks, go out and fix them. We do. We fix everything that gets identified. But other leaks pop up. Other leaks may not have been captured in that leak detection. Like I said, the tip of a pencil at 60 pounds of pressure, we run our system at 67 pounds, it's, you know, is over 630,000 cubic feet, you know, if it runs for a year. That equates to $235,000, you know, or somewhere between 150 and 200, or whatever it is, you know, depending on the rate and the duration. So if I was to guess how many leaks we have out there right now, we identified 2 on our last leak detection. I bet you we have, God, I don't know, more 50 plus.
So anything from a 5/8 inch all the way up to like
A service leak, anything, you know? They do go around and they check every main. They can't capture every leak.
And this is a great question that you were speaking to the leak detection technology. It just sounded like there was several different technologies, acoustic and these other methods where you're closing valves and checking to see. In terms of time and cost, you kind of gave some rough numbers, but in terms of time to pull off an actual leak detection of the whole town, are you talking months? And
Yeah, I think they probably, it depends on the availability that they have, and I think they usually do listening at night, but there's experts that come in and do it, there's only a handful, right? I mean, there's not many around it anymore.
We use, right, in this area, it's Heath Consultants, it's Liston
Yeah.
Environmental, and there's really not all that many more that, you know.
Is it worth us considering purchasing the materials so that it's and that we could look at the opportunity cost to see if there's any way to, you know?
I wouldn't wanna buy into that, only because, one, it takes training. It takes a lot of training
Yeah.
to do, you know, good leak detection. I don't wanna be the one signing it, saying, okay, we found the 3 leaks and we're done. You know, I think you have to outsource that
Okay.
to
I
a
appreciate
company
it.
that does leak.
I have one last question, suggestion, sort of. As far as the meter replacement, it seems as though we got a quarter of it left, 1144 out of 4526. Is there a possibility that we could, A, go after the zero, the negative reads first, and then work backwards in that way? And then also, is there a timeline you could give us and a possible, like, cost to you as opposed to, so because if there's, let's say, like, for example, it took 8 years to get to this point. If we did 8 years and actually look at the comparison versus 1 year or 6 months of having a contractor do it, just trying to see apples to apples, what is it really gonna cost us and what's the best route? If we could save $1 million a year in water losses and you know, and hire somebody for $2 million, then it's well worth it instead of, you know, having 8 years down the road. I don't know, your thoughts on that, if there's a possible timeline and strategy that we could, you know, like even a date to say, can we get these all replaced by X date?
Again, it comes down to the, you know, how many, one is coordination getting in these homes. This Bartlett Road water main replacement, I have 8 old meters on that project. I think it's 12 old meters on that project. Those will get replaced during that project. Joe, your house is one of them.
We're coming in whether you like it or not.
The lead line replacement project, you know, we do 100 lead line services replaced each year. And on this, you know, my next roster, I'm looking at about 22, just under 25. I think it's 22 old meters that are still in place, so we'll get those out of the system. So that's how we're going at it. I don't have staff right now to go out and do 15 meter replacements a day.
My only thought is that if we're actually losing anywhere close to what this auditor suggested, we're at 1/10 the actual value of the whole budget for, it might be worth
It's not
putting.
meters though. At least I disagree with, you know,
Okay,
that estimate, you know,
I'll sit back.
on the meter, the revenue, that was based on 5.7%, is that accurate? We made that assumption that we were losing 5.7% per meter.
Yeah, I think there was just some misunderstanding maybe at the small grouping of inaccurate meters, where they were or were not on the older meters.
So 73% of the meters have been replaced.
Yeah.
So we're talking, you know, we're talking 27% with the old style. But I also wanna make this point, even if I could,
Magic
you know,
wand.
do a magic wand, and I could replace every meter in town in one day, right? They come with a allowable variance of 1.5%. So based on our total consumption, the very first day, we could lose $230,000 in revenue by a 1.5% loss on all brand new meters. So meter replacement is something we gotta stay committed to, but we're not gonna go replace these meters and say, okay, we just recouped $1 million. It's not gonna happen.
Right, and even American Water Works, the same people that did the study, have guidelines on meter accuracy as well, so it's completely acceptable to be within the ranges that Steve mentioned, because there's just no way, as we've mentioned before, that you can really measure every single last drop in the system. So you just do the best you can and stay on top of all the different moving parts that we kind of went through tonight.
Thank you very much.
Councilor DeMarco?
Thank you for being here, and thank everybody for asking really, really good questions. I'm gonna be a little repetitive, then I'm gonna get back to the main point, because, you know, everybody looks at this, and we saw a presentation where we're talking, you know, amounts of water, but everybody at home is thinking dollars and cents. You know, how do we get our bill down? And, you know, you talked about our community being at about 25% water loss, and the ideal place to be is 10 to 15%. Now, being a seaside community, maybe 17 or 18%. But based on the fact you had said a lot of the communities around us are seeing similar water loss, and they still have higher rates than we do, I'm sorry, lower rates than we do on their water, would taking the steps to get us down, would even save us money? Like, what's,
Can I add one thing before you jump in? It all depends on how, our rates dependent on our budget, right?
yep,
And how we choose to fund water main projects. Most of our water main projects for the last 15 years that I've been here have been funded through loans, which create debt service. And that's a big piece of your water rate right now. Going back to Councilor Ruggiero's, question about the pie chart.
yeah,
75% of our budgets go to the MWRA water assessments. A portion goes to personnel, right? A portion goes to supplies. A portion goes to debt services. And we're only left with a small portion for daily system maintenance, really.
got you.
So it's all how you budget it. Your rate doesn't necessarily change because the town saves water.
Got you. So, like you said, and I was gonna get to that, if you replace the 1,144 meters with a magic wand tomorrow, it's not gonna really have a significant impact on everybody's rate.
It's not gonna change the rate
Yeah.
in the next bill.
Yeah.
It's gonna help us with our unaccounted for water, and it's gonna lessen non-revenue water.
So, I mean, I guess my question is really more for the town manager then at this point than it is for you, sir. It's, if we took your key recommendations of improving documentation, leak detention, replacing meters, and digital asset management, it doesn't sound like that's gonna make a significant reduction in the cost on the taxpayers. I mean, but what about, but the question I have, Steve, for you, I guess, is if we could do, hypothetically, a $30 to $57 million project to replace the existing water lines, would that make a difference?
It does. It makes a difference because it's always cheaper to be proactive than reactive. It's always cheaper to plan and improve infrastructure, right? So you're saving those costs. You have a water main break that you're not planned for, it's much more expensive. So, and that translates into tax dollars.
So bottom line is, the only way to really lower the town's water bills is for the town to pay to do the project, otherwise it's on all of us. Is that essentially it?
Just so that I could,
Town manager.
I just wanna make sure everyone understands, we're looking at unaccounted for water, right? So the way to account for that water would be to do these projects. I don't wanna have any illusion out there that, hey, we do this major $57 million project, we're gonna lower your water bills, because we're a consumption-based system. MWRA has fixed costs. We have fixed costs in the system. You can have 100% of your water accounted for, we're still gonna have the same fixed costs. So, you know, I just wanna make sure everyone understands that we're now accounting for that unaccounted for water, but it's gonna be going somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And so the bills, I don't want, everyone's gonna say, well, it's gonna be $1 million off of our bills spread out against the 4,500 homes that we have. It doesn't necessarily translate to that.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, proper management would be to certainly take some of the recommendations, look at our asset management systems, and try to come up with a really good plan.
I'm done asking questions. The last comment I'm gonna make though, Chief, is respectfully, we're talking about water loss here. That's what the study is about. And getting back to my original point, the thing that the community of Winthrop cares about is their water bills are through the roof. That's the number one thing. That's why everybody's listening. It doesn't have to do with how much water are we losing, it's how much money am I paying on my water bill.
And I'm not happy with my bill either.
No, neither am I. Thank you for your time.
Just an
Ryan had a
observation which may help is that, you know, where you're located geographically, and what I see from the percent of your total meters, you have over 95% of your meters are less than 3/4 inch, which leads me to believe you don't have a lot of large users in town to offset a lot of the maintenance and cost of running a water system. So it's being put on the backs of all the residents in town. So you have, go to Newton, you have Boston College, you have other large users, manufacturing, you know, that will pick up a lot of the costs. Here you don't. And I think that's what's really leading to it, is that you have all these other things that Steve mentioned, MWRA costs are being kind of put in on just the water users themselves.
Councilor Belcher?
At this point, a lot of my questions have been answered, but generally, it looks like we're looking at a few different areas for improvement, right? There's infrastructure, main leaks, there's meter replacements, and then there's some administrative things that could be improved. And I think one of my questions is directed at Director Calla is, can the DPW, the way it's structured now and the way it's staffed now, handle the administrative work that's needed to long-term maintain a tighter water system?
So again, I wouldn't call it a tighter water system, better record keeping.
Right, right. Yeah.
No, we're not staffed properly for, certainly not for GIS, certainly not for GIS inputting to get to that point. And even when we get to that point, you know, if we want to, you know, you want to do not just spot checking on accounts, you want somebody to look at every account on a daily basis, that takes time, that takes manpower and staff. Right now, the water department has one billing clerk, that's it. And we have we're a consolidated department, so we now have, you know, a shared labor group, where there was a time when there was a 12-person staff in the water department that were, you know, fully licensed craftsmen, you know, water department. We've evolved to something different. We chose to go to a consolidated department. So you know, we lost, that 12 people, that group was out just doing water work every single day. You know, preventative maintenance and things like that. No, we don't have that anymore. You know, we have the license, you know, my license and my operations manager have to have the license to operate a system. We have that. But it takes us out of our offices into the field anytime there's a problem, because we have to be overseeing, our license has to be on the job.
So with the consolidated way the DPW runs now, it seems relatively unrealistic to think that we can make any real administrative improvements to record keeping and things like that.
Without increasing staff.
Right.
Yeah.
If you were fully staffed as far as your labor force goes, would it still be the same situation?
I wouldn't have a laborer, truck driver inputting GIS data, I don't.
Well, that's true, yeah, fair. Okay, so that's helpful to know. Would contracting out not just the meter replacements, but some of the longer-term water system record keeping and stuff like that, would that be a lifted burden off of you, or what's the return on investment on something like that?
I would certainly love to hear the program, understand it, if that's even an option out there, I'm sure, do it.
Thank you. And then for.
I guess my answer is any help is good.
Of course.
Right.
And then my question for the auditor is, looking at the $232 per connection annual cost that goes out, it looks like it's broken down to about $74 of real loss that's included in that $232, and $154 in apparent losses. Now, if we were within the DEP's recommendation of 10 to 15%, do you have an estimate on what that cost would be? Or this might be kind of tied into what Councilor DeMarco was saying, in that there is no real cost savings out to the consumer.
Well, I think it, you know, it may be offset by the investment that's gonna be needed to get to that level. You know, so it goes to the point of where you're gonna take on the money to do all the improvements of the system, which is loans and debt service and, you know, infrastructure money hopefully is coming, you know, that's maybe a year away. You don't know how much or what's gonna be earmarked for certain towns, cities. Is it gonna be loans, principal forgiveness? Is there gonna be 0% interest loans? Hopefully, that's what people are hoping on. So maybe that's a time to take advantage of that. You know, we have a lot of clients that are trying to get ahead and designing projects or aligning themselves to be prepared for the infrastructure funding coming. So I would suggest, if you are serious about doing a plan or a capital program or understanding what's gonna be involved, or a long-term goal of improving the system, time would be to jump on it now, so that you have that done and completed in time. So if the funding is there, and it is in a sense that is very favorable for towns and cities to use, and it doesn't, you'd be ready to go. If you take advantage of that type of a program, there's lower interest rates, and you're borrowing a lot of money, that can have a big impact on rates. So that would be where maybe the difference in the ratepayers would see.
Thank you. And just one final comment, going back to what Councilor Ruggiero mentioned about pie chart and looking at where the money for these water bills is going. I think from what I've heard is transparency is really what people are looking for. So I think that's an important thing to look at and look into. That's all I have.
I'll just go back to Councilor Aiello first, for a minute.
So first, just a narrow question on the $232 figure. Is it safe to assume, or would I be incorrect in understanding that people's real experience is not going to be at average necessarily, because you're going to have some meters that are not performing well and other meters are performing well, and so you may have some people experiencing $300 and other people experiencing $150, because we seem to have certain people that are experiencing real spikes and others not spikes, and so I would imagine there's some variability around that number, that not everybody has the same experience. Is that probably true?
You can essentially take out a meter out of, 5 houses in a row, test every single meter, and you're gonna get a different accuracy.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be within a certain range, but it's just the nature of
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
there's also, we talk about leaks in the system, but there's also leaks on the household side, right? Leaky toilet, faucet turned on that's left on. So a lot of times those can lead to spikes in bills.
So my question is, so we've got costs that we've heard, right? 60 million to fix all the pipes eventually, roughly, right? My assumption is, you gotta keep the town operating, you're not gonna dig up the entire time. If we got $60 million from heaven, I don't think we're all gonna do it in Minnesota, right? Because people will kill us if we're doing that. So my sense is that there's probably a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan to sort of do this and be able to have people live in their neighborhoods and commerce to continue to survive and all that stuff. And there's an economic challenge between how long you take to do it and the cost rising versus trying to get the loss number down. So it's a multidimensional problem. Where would this town go to get somebody to describe our choices, describe what the cost might be annually, describe what the benefits might accumulate over time as you're going through that, and thinking about financing options, right? So, I mean, primarily it's the water rates that are supposed to fund these things, but as you described, we need to be prepared to be opportunistic by having a plan in place and maybe some conceptual programs drafted out. How would we get a document? I think that's what I'm missing. Maybe others might feel the same. It'd be great to have a document with that analysis and say, here's 3 choices for the town that the council can think about. Get some input from the community about, do they want to go through a 5-year program, a 10-year program? Here's the impact on rates. Here's the benefit to you over the medium term and longer term. There might be some pain up front. I don't know what the variables will tell us, but where would we turn for someone to put something like that together?
That's exactly what I recommended as far as the capital improvement program. So that's the
Okay.
document that is staged and prioritized to tackle the biggest needs first.
And it would describe the economics of various pathways that we might take as well?
Yep, it'll have, and we work with the client to identify how much infrastructure they'd like to take on annually, and we can kind of give different rates through bonding or other methodology using the SRF program, whatever you normally like to take for borrowing. Run that through the analysis and do sort of a flow chart or a 5-year plan of what the value is, and then, we're actually partnering with Abraham's group for the Weir water system in Hingham, Hall, and Cohasset. You may have heard that they purchased that aging system about 2-3 years ago, so we're developing a capital plan for them right now. And in turn, then Matt and his father will be taking the data and understanding, well, what's the impact on this type of work that's gonna be required to keep our system operating, on the ratepayers over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So that's essentially, it's called the Water System Master Plan, it's called the Capital Improvement Plan, there's lots of interchangeable names, but that's exactly what I was thinking that would be recommended to help you plan out where the money needs to be spent and where you're gonna get the biggest bang for the buck.
And if the council chose to go in that direction, approximately how much would the development of such a plan and the process to achieve a plan that everybody sort of buys into, cost us, and about how long would it take to complete that
So usually,
document?
you know, if you go to a nice restaurant, you have the à la carte menu you can pick things off of, and that's generally how I explain master plans, because you can say, well, I need to do a hydraulic model, or no, I already have one, or I wanna do GIS, no, I don't need to, or, so there's different things that you can include or not include in a plan, so the cost can really vary. But generally speaking, you're probably looking at $50,000 to $100,000 in that ballpark, and usually it'll take at least 6 to 9 months to go through.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's helpful. Nothing else?
Vice President Ruggiero.
Just,
The Italians.
one more thing that I had in my notes that I don't think we touched on was, you know, you mentioned, for lack of a better term, the gate at the entrance of Winthrop where that MWRA meter sits. And you said that the responsibility is on the MWRA to routinely test that meter. And they provided you with that documentation. How often did you say that they do it, and how often are they required to do it? That's my first question. Follow-up to that is, I guess to the town, but do they tell us when they're doing this so that we can have someone on site sort of verifying? And is that a practice? Is that like a common practice in other cities and towns, both MWRA and not MWRA water supplied?
I'm not sure if you have access to the vault at all? No? Yeah, so they keep it pretty close-knit. I know that some clients will go and hire a meter testing company to come in. Not necessarily if it's on an MWRA meter, but on their own larger meters, just to make sure they're being accurate. But, Adam, I don't know if you're still there, if you have the MWRA data or information about how many times they're testing, because we did, I think, point out in the report that they only had done one pedo test, which really can confirm the accuracy of the meter more specific.
Pedo?
Essentially, they run flow through a device that allows them to measure the flow more accurately, so they can mirror the flow they're seeing versus the flow that's going through the meter.
Okay.
And then they can correlate the two to make sure if it's reading accurately or not, or judge how close it is. So, that's really what we'd like to see done, and that's how this kind of the top standard is for meter testing.
Jim, can I have just one more?
One
I'd like to
more.
get freebies. This is a freebie, I hope. You mentioned that your firm has done some of these master plans, and some of them have been the full suite, and some of them are more targeted. Would it be possible for you to give us a scope of work that somebody asked you to propose on? Would be number one, so we could look at it and sort of get up to speed on it. And secondarily, if you had completed a report, or you know of somebody else that completed a report that represents the sort of the broadest CapEx management plan, financial analysis, to be able to get that and read it, and just to see one of our peer communities might be doing, that would be great value, I think, and we get it for free. It's always a good.
They're mostly a public document,
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
had a couple that were posted on a town website we can share with you. I think Adam and I worked on one for the town of Plymouth, which was, it was over 10,000 words, right? It was the biggest one. They have 6 pressure zones, you know, well over 200, 300 miles of pipe, very complex water system. You know, we developed a flow chart of which project to do first, which to do second, costs associated with each. But that was, you know, the Cadillac version of a plan, and then, you know, we're doing another one now for another client, which is mostly based on water quality. You know, they have their own wells, and they have to provide them, and they're more of a focus on what do we need to do now do treatment at our supplies versus, this one seems to be mostly focused on distribution.
Yeah.
And so it's not as complex as you would if you involved
Whatever
treatment
you
at
think
home.
is appropriate to
Yeah.
get, if you could hand an RFP, that's sort of a request, and then a completed project to the staff, and then they could share it with the council, that would be great. Thank you.
Ryan, how did the process start? Did you start with a hydraulic model, or how do you get going on.
Hydraulic model is, especially for a distribution system assessment, is vital. So if you don't have one already, it would be highly recommended that would be the first step. Hydraulic models, if you're unfamiliar with it, allows you to simulate conditions in a water system, from demands, pressure, simulating fire flow testing at any location, improvements to the water system. If you were to replace something, what would it do to flows? If you get a situation where you have to shut a valve, reverse flows, if there's water quality issues or concerns, and it can be GIS based as well. So we've done those that are GIS based, that can be easily transmitted between different programs. So that's recommended too in a CIP.
Well, again, thank you, and just, going back to Vice President Rogerio's point at the beginning on charts, and to give people an idea, and I think that's, we could do a little Finance 101 at a not too far away meeting, but, just to give people a quick idea, water and sewer is about $10.5 million on the budget, right? So water's about $5 million and sewer's about $5.6 million. Out of the $5 million for water that's in our budget, $2 million or so is the MWRA assessment. And about $1.5 million is debt service, principal and interest. And then, much smaller for about $500,000 for payroll and such other fixed expenses. And if you go to sewer, it's about a $5.6 million investment and a much smaller debt service. But if you look totally, as Director Calla mentioned, out of the $10.5 million or so, $5.8 million is an assessment. About $1.6, $1.7 million right now is debt service. So it's the vast majority comes from the debt service and the expense of the product. So, I think it's important to look at that, and then it comes to a cost-benefit analysis, right? How much are we going to spend? How much are we going to recoup? And, if we were to wave that magic wand again and fix every leak and every new thing, the way, my understanding is, the way the MWRA assesses us is on a 3-year rolling average. So you don't even know it, it takes like 3 years to really see, or 2 or 3 years before you see that assessment change. And, it's pretty convoluted, but I think it's important to do a little Finance 101 on that too. But I can't thank you guys enough for coming out. I know it's part of your scope, but we do very much appreciate it. And, I hope the council has had a lot of questions answered. And if we have follow-ups after, I'm sure you'll be there to help us through. Does Steve or Town Manager want to say anything else?
No, I think just one thing, anytime we did a rate increase, I believe from 2007 forward, we have put out a public document about that increase and why that increase was happening. So how much of your increase was going towards capital, how much was going towards debt, how much was going towards personnel. So those are publicly available on our website, but we'd be happy to go back and look at the full budget and give you a pie graph.
And
on that.
Ryan made another, obviously a good point on higher users, and saying we're a community that has 94% of our base comes from residential and 6% basically from commercials. So we don't have those big universities or big malls and stuff like that are gonna be big users. So it puts more of a burden on the user. But again, thank you guys very much. I know your time is precious.
Mr. President, is the public gonna be able to
No,
ask?
the public will be asking, we'll be having public comment in a minute, but there's no questions allowed for the consultants.
This is a presentation,
This is
right?
just a presentation, yes. But we will be taking public comment in a
Will the
minute.
public be able to ask the auditor at some point about the audit?
Will the public be able to ask the auditor questions? I don't believe so, but they could go through us and we
So that
can
means
ask.
all questions are answered.
Well, if you would like to ask us a question in public comment, we will make sure the auditor gives us a response in a
Thank you.
timely manner. Again, thank you guys. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Adam.
I like that.
Council President Terry, could we take a
Yeah,
2-minute
that's what I'm gonna
recess?
say. We're gonna have a 5-minute recess, thank you. All right, we're back in session. We have no,
Recording in progress.
thank you. We have no public hearings. We will go to public comment. Jack?
Jack Dog, precinct 3. I'm not 100% sure, because I didn't read it myself, but one of the ways that the auditor said you could reduce water loss was to reduce water pressure. I'm not 100% sure. I gave my report to somebody, and he picked that out. It's the only thing he picked out. I'm wondering if you reduce water pressure, does that affect the water, the quality of the water? If you reduce water pressure, does it affect the quality of the water? I have here a Massachusetts Water Resource Authority Water Quality Update. And this is from August 2020. And it's a sampling it's sampling data. So what I noticed, because it's in red, that Winthrop has a very high incidence, positives of total coliform. All the other cities and towns generally register 0 positives. And in 2020, August 2020, we had 13 positives, which is, so we sampled 36 samples. So that is over 36% of the samples were positive for 36% for total coliform. Now I don't have, and I looked it up the other day, anticipating this, if I could have asked the auditor the question, because the auditor did mention quality of water twice at this meeting tonight, so I wanted to ask him that question, but we'll do that sooner or later. So I did look, well, I took my printer and I threw it in the rubbish. That's why I don't have a copy.
Okay.
And the new audit is September, just a few months ago, 2021. And the positives, I believe, have tripled from 2020, about total coliform.
If they tripled, we're over 100%.
Tripled from 2020. I don't have the paper because my print is in the rubbish, but I wish someone would look this up. So I don't have to speak to it, but you can look it up on the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority Water Quality Update. So you can look it up yourself, and you can do the numbers yourself, and then present some type of report to the townspeople. And I think the reason we flushed the water system out last year, I think in year 2021, is because we did have a lot of positives. So does that mean that we have to do more flushing? I'm wondering whether if you lower the water pressure, does water from outside the pipe get back into the pipe? Cause positive quality. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Jeff. Any other public comment? Go ahead.
Yes, Kurt Millar, Precinct 2. I know it was upsetting to see some of the information that was presented. And I think it's great that the request for more transparency on this, for the kind of financial end of it, the metering end of it. I think that would be great to see, because there's still some confusion. You can read this 5 times over and still it's not very clear to the average person to really break it down. Some concerning things that I did get out of this were that EP actually was told that there was an independent auditor that actually reviews billing on a regular basis, and then they contacted the auditor, and the auditor said that, no, it's not happening. So reviewing bills on a regular basis, I mean, that should be done consistently. I mean, that can clear up some issues people in town have. I mean, one month you get a bill for, you know, $500, next 2 months you get it for 50. I mean, it'd be good to know why those things are going on, which kind of leads into, you know, abatements. I mean, I don't know where the number of, you have to be 300% of average consumption for a given account to be considered for an abatement. That seems like a really high number to even be considered for an abatement. I don't know if that's a standard number through, you know, the state that we're doing, but I don't know about any other citizen. If my bill went up 300% from a normal bill, or even 250%, I'd expect an abatement on that because something is clearly going wrong. I mean, you could have a water leak in your house, I understand that, but if it's already cleared out that you don't have that, and it's just a weird bill, I don't know, that just seems like a lot. The other thing would be clarity on, which I think is good for the transparency, is the 24 municipal accounts that are, that get abated meter consumption. So I started digging into the budget and looking at different enterprise funds, and I actually looked at the rink, because the rink actually should be using a fair amount of water. So being an enterprise fund, it should be self-sustaining and paying their portion of the water bill, in my opinion. So I couldn't see, I looked at the expenses on the budget for the rink, and there's no line item for any water. There's heat, you know, every kind of other utility, pretty much, but no water bill. The Zamboni takes like 200 gallons of water. Well, who's paying for that? I can't see it on the budget line anywhere for that. So that's what actually got me digging in when I saw the 24 municipal accounts. I'm like, well, is that still considered, you know, part of the middle school, and that's why it's not a line item? Is there an actual meter for the rink? Is it separate for the auditorium and the gym? I don't know if there's one meter that covers it all. And then I think clarity for what municipal buildings are actually abated, so people understand where that comes from. So I think that's pretty much all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Are there any Zoom comments?
No, we have no one raising their hand.
And I will say, just a quick response on, for example, the enterprise funds, the rinks or whatever, it is metered, and it's part of the indirect cost that is in the budget. It's not labeled, you know, there's a number of different things that are involved in indirect costs. So that's one of the reasons. No other public comment?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Shannon Poulos?
Shannon?
Check the mute button.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, Shannon?
Oh, sorry about that. Shannon Poulos, precinct 3. Really quick comment. I hadn't heard anything in terms of our representative from Winthrop on the MWRA Board of Directors, and what, if anything, has been done in terms of, you know, a way from a mitigation perspective to lower some of the fixed costs? Because I think that was one of the things that was resounding today, was that, you know, given the high percentage of residential users relative to fixed costs, just curious if that's been broached with the MWRA, and whether we think that there's any, you know, opportunity to explore additional mitigation to lower some of those fixed costs. That was all. Thank you.
Good point, Shannon, thank you. We will check that. Anything else?
Nope, no more hands.
Mr. President, if I may?
Yeah, sure.
I have a parliamentary inquiry.
Sure.
I'd like to know, what is the procedure for submitting an agenda item to the council?
What is the procedure? You submitted, this really isn't the time for it, but if you want to ask, you submit an agenda item to the council president by usually Thursday morning, and the council president elects to put it on or not to put it on the agenda.
So I submitted a non-binding resolution last week to be added to the agenda, and it was not added. And I'd like to know, do you have the sole discretion for what goes on the agenda?
I do.
Okay. I'd like to appeal the judgment of the chair regarding the submission of my resolution.
So noted. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to correspondence.
I have received no correspondence.
Committee reports, public health and safety.
On Thursday, 3/3, the Public Health and Safety Committee met to discuss the issue of an additional access road to the Gorman Fort Bank School. Prior to the meeting, I spoke at length to School Superintendent Lisa Howard. She filled me in on what the school department has done to minimize the traffic backup and maintain the safety of the students. She reported that the school department had worked hard to establish a safe and efficient traffic flow, that the parents may sign a permission slip to allow their children to walk away from the school to meet their parent in another location, and they could walk or bike their children to and from school, that school hours are already staggered to the extent possible and still have enough legal hours in the school day, that crossing guards are very difficult to find and even more expensive, and that she wondered if we were responding to just a few very vocal complaints about the traffic situation, since the school department had included a question about traffic concerns in their parent survey and found very little interest in it. I reported all of this to the committee, and with the help of attendees in person and on Zoom, we reviewed what had already been done on the issue and other ideas that had been explored since the school was built. It was determined that emergency egress for police or firefighters had been addressed with the installation of the emergency gate to Golden Drive, and the potential road through Governor's Garden was estimated to be very expensive. After deliberation, the committee recommends that given the low revenue for the town at this time, the number of other projects demanding attention and funds, and the apparent low interest in changing the manner of drop-off and pickup at the school, we should table this issue indefinitely. Former President of the Council, Peter Gill, offered to work with the committee to compile a history of the project so the town will be more fully informed. I expect to provide that history to be posted by the end of April. I will also contact the Parent Association to determine if they would be interested in developing a walking school bus. Respectfully submitted.
Thank you very much. Finance Committee.
Yes, the Finance Committee met prior to this meeting, just before at 5:30, and there was 2 items on the agenda. One was the enterprise fee study for the amount of $30,000, and the second one was the authorization of unpaid bills of the amount of $2,290.50, both of which came out of committee with positive recommendations, unanimous positive recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor. I will make a quick report on the Town Manager Search Committee. Town Manager Search Committee, first of all, it did an incredible job from what I've heard, and talked with the consultant and was at meetings. They had over 15 hours of interviews and discussions and going through resumes, and my understanding is that they have come up with 3 finalists. Those finalists now are being reviewed and background checks are being done. I am expecting to receive those 3 finalist names by Monday. I will be asking later in the meeting, there'll be a training session for counselors, new counselors, but all counselors. Next Tuesday at 5, we will plan on having a special council meeting, as long as we have a quorum, just to be able to announce, literally, just for the sole purpose of announcing the 3 candidates, so we could be transparent. Once they become finalists, once they've accepted that finalist position, they're under the understanding that their names would then become public. So I'll ask for a motion later to schedule a meeting for next Tuesday at 5, just to announce the names publicly. We will then announce that we will have council interviews. The plan would be to have council interviews on the 31st of March, time to be determined, probably at the senior center, which would enable as many of the citizens to go as possible. These interviews will be taped. They will not be live or on Zoom, because candidate 2 would be able to watch the candidate 1's interview, and we don't want that. So they will be taped, and they will be shown after the meeting, I'm sure, multiple times. And the hope, again, is, I know I said in January 4th that my goal was to have a town manager in place by June 1st. I know Chief Delahanty's goal is much sooner, but, you know, the goal would be to potentially have a name for the council, the first or second meeting in April, and depending on schedules and such, hopefully by the beginning, middle of May, we will have a new town manager in place, with zero disrespect to the current town manager. But,
I'm more excited than anyone else.
yeah, I'm sure you are. So I just wanted to, first of all, thank the search committee, including Councilor DeMarco. It's a tremendous amount of work in a relatively short period of time, and their efforts do not go unnoticed, and I thank them for that. So I just wanted to update the council and the town on that. Now we will ask for a couple of other things, I guess, out of committees that I will do in far of the Millerfield Committee. One of the items that was done in conjunction with Millerfield and the SBAC was the reconstruction or construction of new tennis courts. The thought is, I did speak with the athletic director, the first tennis match this year happens to be a girls' match, and the first home match, and I think it's April 11th. And the thought would be to do a rededication of the Wallace B. McLean tennis courts at that time. I will have more information soon, but that would be the goal, to have a rededication of the tennis courts at that time. So that's it for committee reports. Town manager report.
Thank you, Mr. President. At your request, we did explore and evaluate the blue light at Delby's Corner. We have concluded that it's warranted to place another blue light there at Delby's Corner to catch everyone off of Washington Ave going into the point, to alert them that there's snow emergency. Again, when they originally went out and did this, there was a budget, and they placed the lights wherever they thought was most advantageous. Again, the additional light is going to be under the purview of the DPW director, and he'll be hiring that out to get that done as soon as possible. Also, at the president's request, we're looking at the waterway access stairs along the water line. So I'm guessing that after talking to the DPW director, before this meeting, there's about 12 or 13 of those stairs. We're going to look at the conditions of those stairs, prioritize a report on which ones need which ones are in the worst condition, and go after them one at a time, multiple times, or we have to come to council for capital expenditures. We will do that once we have a scope of the problem.
I appreciate those 2 items.
No
Thank you.
problem. We did meet with Quincy over Zoom, with the mayor of Quincy. You know, he's still very dedicated to the ferry. We have also come to an agreement on the fee that is owed from Quincy to Winthrop for last year, which is come to an agreement of $120,000 from the $162,000 we usually get, minusing out the weekends and the days of service they didn't get from us during that. That doesn't really help the budget, because we still have the capital expenditures of the ferry. Quincy doesn't, so you know, they get a freebie a little bit on that. So that's a $40,000 deficit that we'll be asking DOT to fund the deficit through the grant process. We also met with the state delegation. When I say we, myself and the council president, on Monday. The the senator and the representative here to talk to us about budget priorities and potential coordination of a more regional aspects to include the ferry, and how we could possibly bring in the MBTA, DOT, Revere, Winthrop, East Boston, and to get the state delegation to lead that for us and to make the connections. So they were very open to that. Also, they were asking for priorities on some funding that they get during the budget process and what we need here in Winthrop, and how do we see them, how do we request from them what we need. So it was a very productive meeting. We had a very good conversation, both the senator and the representative. I just have gotten some complaints, several complaints actually, on meeting decorum from our sub meetings, which don't fall under the jurisdiction of the town manager, but does fall under the jurisdiction of the council president and the council. And I guess increasingly we're becoming more and more intolerant of each other's ideas. And I think at some point we need to have a training with all our committees and our chairs of the committees to educate them what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. I've been talking to K&P Law. I have raised a concern that we really have to follow a fine line, because we're government actors. Government actors have to obey the First Amendment. There's a Natick case out there, a Natick school committee case. Someone was escorted out because they didn't like what that person was saying. Natick is paid in settlement to that person for violation of the constitutional rights. So again, we shouldn't be intolerant of anyone's ideas, and we shouldn't tolerate disrespect, argumentative name-calling, stuff that borderlines on criminal activity. The chair should know that and should be able to shut these meetings down. So again, I'm asking the council, through the council president, to allow me to coordinate that training and set a date for that training, and have all the chairs of all our subcommittees there. K&P Law, I would ask Janelle Austin, who has done MCLE training on this issue and also an MMA training on this issue recently. So it's not just Winthrop, it's multiple communities looking for this type of training. Thank you for that. And I also passed out a letter from the Transit MBTA about cutting some stops down on Taft's Ave out on that. So I'll be looking for feedback. If anyone has any concerns, let me know. I can certainly coordinate and set up a meeting with the MBTA to discuss that further. These stops down there are kind of close together, and they're trying to spread them out to reasonable distances, more consistent with other communities and more consistent with their transit plan. I did meet today with the Metro Credit Union to discuss different programs that they could offer our community as well as our employees. And also look at financial literacy, and maybe have classes around financial literacy that they would actually sponsor and present and in our community. And also to that, also have a class on scams on the elderly at the senior center, so they understand what financial scams are going on and what not to do. So it was a very productive conversation with Metro. They'll be introducing some programs, even with a 40-year loan to get people into housing, or, at a cheaper rate, a more affordable rate. That would go to our employees as well as the community. So it was an interesting conversation. They're gonna give me some more proposals around these ideas that we sat around the table today and thought about. So I'm excited about the financial literacy. I'm excited really to try to talk with the superintendent to get more of a financial program in place at the high school level. Kids going off to college, how do they build credit? What type of credit card they have, they can prepay, start building their credit now in high school. So when they get out of college, they have that stability and are able to move their careers forward. The CBD, Center Business District project, is back up and running as of Monday. They'll be fully up and running the next Monday, but we've asked them to concentrate and to get out of the main center area, by the end of May. Again, the add-on stuff for by Pauline Street and Pleasant Street, that were add-ons to their contract, they have to go beyond May to finish those. Those weren't part of the original scope. The original scope work, we're asking them to finish up and to expedite it if they can. Parks and Recs will be having a spring fair in May. This is the first spring fair they'll have, and Winthrop wanted to have a bike rodeo. I have connected them with Parks and Recs, and the police department will also participate in doing one major event. And I know Betsy Shane is looking to do a major event in the center once it's completed. So a lot of positive things going into the spring. Next week I'll be out Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and I will be out of state, so I'll make the election of who to fill my shoes and forward it to the council.
Thank you very
That
much.
concludes my report.
Any questions for the town manager? Vice President Ruggiero?
Thank you, Chief Delahanty. On the point with the financial literacy, I think that's really great. And, you know, it makes me happy to hear that. In a prior life, I volunteered at a lot of these financial literacy seminars. And the State Treasury Department runs what they call a Credit for Life Fair. And that's a grant program that schools can apply for. And the way the program works is that the students will walk into the gymnasium, they'll spin a wheel, and okay, this is your job. And your job comes with this salary. And you can then, sort of like live life based on that salary. And it sort of puts things into perspective for the kids. Okay, if this is what I'm trying to do in college, or if this is the life decisions that I want to make. And anyways, I think it's a really great program, and there is a grant opportunity for that that I think public schools can work with. That's something that we could look into, and I'd be more than willing to assist with. So, yeah, just figured I'd put in a plug for that.
No, please, thank you.
Council Flockhart.
I would like to add on to that and to say that they should also be taught practical things like how to balance a checkbook and how to write out a check, which I understand is a dying need. But nevertheless, it applies to many forms.
Yeah. Yes, I know the big thing is Venmo, and I'm still a check writer, so.
Anything else? Thank you very much. School department report, there was a school committee meeting last night. It was a relatively light agenda. The primary focus was their subcommittee on budget, trying to finalize a budget. Obviously, they're looking at a level service budget and a needs budget. They are looking at, obviously, as everyone is now in these times, increasing energy cost. So their plan is to come back at the next school committee meeting and have a budget in place for the school committee for the school committee to vote on. And they also talked about retirements. They've had, a handful more retirements than they've had in recent years, which, plus and minus like everything. The plus is it helps the budget a little bit. The minus, though, is you lose a lot of tremendously seasoned professional teachers who have given so much of their time over an incredible amount of years, and we thank them all for their service. And that is it for the school committee report this evening. Old business, we will go back to finance. There's a motion for the enterprise fee study. Do you have a motion there?
Yes, the Finance Committee has a unanimous positive recommendation for the funding of the enterprise fee study.
So there's a motion out of finance to appropriate certified free cash in the amount of not to exceed $30,000 for the enterprise fee study. And it does come out with positive recommendation, does not require a second. Any discussion on it? Seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Council Honan?
Yes.
Council Fusillo?
Yes.
Council Munson?
Yes.
Council Belcher?
Yes.
Council DeMarco?
Yes.
Council Flockhart?
Yes.
Council Aiello?
Yes.
Vice President Ruggiero?
Yes.
President Lettieri?
Yes. Council Fusillo, is there another motion coming out?
Yes, there is. The Finance Committee also recommended with a positive unanimous recommendation to approve the paying of unpaid bills in the amount of $2,290.50.
Okay, there is a motion out of finance to authorize unpaid bills from a prior year to be paid from current departmental budgets as noted below, or take any other action relative thereto, and that total is $2,290.50. There's a motion that came out of finance, does not need a second. Any questions, discussions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and that is passed. New business. the town council vote to appropriate $290,000 in free cash, certified free cash for shared expenses lines. We will send that to finance. There is I would like to entertain a motion to suspend council rules. First of all, to add a meeting on next Tuesday, March 22nd at 5 p.m. for the sole purpose, and one agenda item is to announce finalists for the town manager's position.
Motion, motion made.
There's a motion by Councilor DeMarco, second by Councilor Flockhart. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing, yes.
Question,
Councilor,
tangentially related, you had described the 31st
as would be interviews.
as the
And that's based on
interviews.
the consultant and the availability of.
Okay, yeah, just a note of a conflict and request if it could be accommodated, but I sit on a couple of corporate boards, and one of my meetings is April 1st. I usually have to fly in the night before for a
We will
dinner.
make accommodations somehow, way, shape, or form, but
That'd
you
be
will definitely have the access to the tapes before we do any, you'll have the availability to look at the interviews before.
I'd like to participate in the interviews.
I'm just not sure if we could do a Zoom. I mean, my intention is, here would be easily enough. Can we do that at the senior center? I'm just looking where it's not a live, I was just looking for a bigger venue, but we can more than, obviously, we could have it here if that's amenable. I just don't want to leave the citizens out of it. Not,
We could do a private Zoom and just include you in the private Zoom.
And we'll make sure that we have a board there with a camera on the candidates.
okay, and maybe if the thought is to have it here, that's fine, and it would work much better for you, but,
Okay.
okay,
All right.
we will definitely accommodate you one way or the other.
Thank you.
There's a, Counselor,
Another
Council Vice
point of
President.
discussion,
Virginia.
and then for the sake of transparency, I had emailed you, Council President, but I will not be available the day of the training.
Of the 22nd.
On the
Training?
the training and the meeting next Tuesday.
Okay, yes.
But I will support the motion.
Seeing no further discussion, I'll take a roll call vote, please.
Council Honan. Yes. Council Fusillo.
Yes.
Council Munson.
Yes.
Council Belcher.
Yes.
Council DeMarco.
Yes.
Council Flockhart.
Yes.
Council Aiello.
Yes.
Vice President Ruggiero.
Yes.
President Lettieri.
Yes. And just to look forward, we won't make the motion now, but to look for your calendars, for the April meetings, the first meeting will be as scheduled. The second meeting, instead of the 19th, would be the 26th to do the spring forum, which is set forth in the charter. So just to mark your calendars, instead of the first and third Tuesdays, it will probably be the first and fourth Tuesdays. Okay. So that's that, spring forum, finalists, conduct interviews on the 31st. All right, we will go to a second round of,
Did you do the motion for the 31st, Mr. President?
I did not do it, we could do it at next council meeting, but we could do it now, too. I'll clarify.
No, next one before it.
being challenged by her phone.
Well, March 22nd.
Well, I was gonna do it on March 22nd,
okay.
but we could,
Whatever you.
yeah, I was gonna do it on March 22nd. We will be obviously having a suspended rules to do a meeting on the 31st for interviews, but we can do that motion on the
Okay.
22nd.
Thank you.
Is the intention to have all three interviews back to back to back?
Yes,
Okay.
and again,
So
for
one night we
transparency
can-
and
yeah.
for, you don't want somebody having an interview then telling everybody the next
Yeah,
day who's
exactly.
on the interview or whatever. So, yeah, how the process has worked in the past is we would just have consecutive interviews of it's gonna be a long meeting. It could be 45 minutes to an hour. Sometimes we would have a 10 to 15-minute discussion in between. If not, we would have discussion after, so, yeah.
And that's a public meeting.
That is a public
Okay,
meeting.
non-executive session.
Yes, not executive session at all. Thank you. Second round of public comment. Anyone in the audience? Anyone? Yes.
I would like to say something. My name is Lee Foley. I think I'm in precinct 2.
Yes.
One, anyway.
Two.
I wrote a letter last week to the town council, to the Board of Health, the school committee, and the CDICR regarding expressing support for transgender rights. There are 27 states that have passed anti-LGBTQ laws, or they're in the middle of passing them right now. And for me, it was I was asking the town to show support for our most vulnerable community. LGBT youth had really high rates of suicide, depression, drug use, homelessness, and it was a way for us to signal to our residents that are LGBTQ families that we're here for them. Some people have rallied to our side, because there were a lot of us that signed a letter. I believe the town council president refused to put this on the agenda. So that's noted, but I guess I wanted to say another thing, that since that letter came out, I've been attacked personally by someone in this town who is a pretty big offender and is well known for attacking people. He contacted my boss and told her that I was a child molester, that I shouldn't be working with her, that she would lose clients if they knew I was working there, and more. But I guess for me, one of the things that I really want to express is that leadership needs to step up, and we need to say this isn't right. When things like this happen, then people like me and others won't speak out. And in fact, people have contacted me to tell me that they've gone on Facebook, they don't want to buy a house in this town because of some of the conversations they've seen on social media. So what I'm saying is that it's important to speak out on behalf of the most vulnerable people in this town. And I'm hoping that that will be reconsidered by the town council, and also to express my appreciation for the support that people that did rally for that. That's all I want to say.
Thank you very much, much appreciated. Anybody on Zoom?
We do. Could you state your name, please?
Me?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, someone on. Thought you were looking.
Phone number 0512.
Hello, Council, how are you? Michael Demento, Precinct 2.
Yes, Michael.
I'd just like to ask the interim town manager / police chief to enforce parking regulations within the town. The interim town manager has been unresponsive to emails from me regarding whether someone doesn't have a proper parking permit or vehicles have been parked throughout the town, and his police chief department has not enforced it. So I asked the council to direct Mr. Del Canty to perform his job.
Thank you. Is that all, Michael? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we have Julia Wallace.
Julia?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. Julie Wallace, Precinct 2. Just a couple really quick things to have an echo here. Yeah, I want to support Lee Foley and what she just stood up and said, and really encourage you guys to, step up and do, speak out for our vulnerable residents, and also allow other people to feel comfortable doing so without being attacked. And I hope we get a chance to hear what Tracy's referendum was. I would be really curious to at least have that on the table to hear. The second thing, I don't think I caught all of this, but in Barbara's public safety report about the GFB access road and mobility and all that, really excited to hear my about, I think there was some procedural policy changes in all of the, I'm definitely one of those loud voices because this is an issue that's I'm very passionate about, but I want to make clear that it's not just me, and I'm sorry if it came across that way. I put all my memos together based on the feedback of over 200 other parents. I had told them that it would be anonymous, so that's why I compiled it, but I would need to provide more of a statistical breakdown so it's not perceived as just a few parents who are concerned about safety and access. But I really appreciated the meetings that we've had with you, Councilor Lettieri, as Council President, the past couple months about all the different ways to take bites at the apple, recognizing that there is no silver bullet for making getting in and out of the GFB easy for everyone, but there's a lot of little things that can be done. So I think I heard Barbara say that the superintendent was open to allowing kids to bike or walk or can meet their parents at more of a park and walk location with permission slip. That's fantastic and totally one of the top things on our list. So I hope that's what that was. I'm really supportive of this moving forward and not looking at the access road as the end all. And there's still so many ways we can improve the situation without having to spend $400,000 or more on an
Julia.
Winthrop.
Denise?
No, that is it.
Mr. President, if I may?
Yeah, we're going to public relations now, and then I'll get you. Speak.
It's part of the parliamentary inquiry. Can I still ask a parliamentary inquiry?
Sure.
Okay. No?
Sure.
Okay, great. So as part of the appeal to the judgment of the chair regarding my submission of my resolution, I neglected to ask for a second so it could proceed to a vote of the council. So I'd like to ask for a second for my appeal.
I'll second that.
Thank you. So I guess we proceed to a vote?
No, we do not. I've already contacted legal on this to ask my authority on this, and I have received an opinion, and I'm gonna stick by that opinion.
That you have sole discretion just to
Yes.
decide what is on the agenda?
Yes, I do. And it's been like that for 15 years, not for me, but for anyone who's sitting in this seat. I take my responsibility very seriously. I respect everyone's rights. And I do not think that is an agenda item that needs to be on a town council agenda. And I do not take anything lightly. I made sure I had legal opinion on it, and I did, and that is what I will stand by.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Point of inquiry.
Sure.
Would it be possible to get a sense of the council writ large in terms of how they feel about this issue?
No, it's not on the agenda. It's not.
Can we
an item
have
on the
this
agenda.
discussion on the next town council agenda to get a sense
Request
of
it
the
to be
council?
put on the
feeling?
next council
I am
agenda.
formally requesting that,
Very good.
and I'll put it in writing as well. Thank
Sure.
you.
All right, public relations. Thursday, March 31st, 2 PM, we will be extending the application deadline for the senior citizen property tax work-off program applications, which are available at the senior center and online. March 30th, 2022, Bon Appetit Julia, Winthrop Public Library, 6 PM. I do not have more information on that. If someone does, please discuss. Council Flockhart?
It's a performance that will be
Okay.
done there. This group has performed at the library previously and been very well received. And so, at this point, there are probably no seats left, but
Okay.
it's worth trying.
Okay, and again, that's March 30th at 6 o'clock at the Winthrop Public Library. Friday, April 1st, Friends of Winthrop Council on Aging, Cash for Gas raffle, tickets available at the Senior Center. And again, as we mentioned earlier, there'll be a spring forum with the priority being budget and other spending matters, which is a charter item, and that will be on April 26th of 2022. I will go around the table. Councilor Honan.
I do not have anything.
Councilor Fusillo.
Nothing.
Councilor Munson.
I just wanted to point out that the blood drive we hosted at the Odd Fellows Hall was wonderful. Thank you for all of you that came and supported us. We're also having another event, longtime Winthrop resident and basketball star, George Caligeros will be doing a reading at the lodge on March 27th. And we also have a flea market scheduled for April 23rd. So we are, thanks to COVID releasing its grip on society, we are starting to have more events. Look forward to more. Thank you.
Councilor Belcher.
All set.
Councilor DeMarco.
Nothing at this time.
Councilor Aiello. Councilor Flockhart.
I was disappointed to see this Viking Longboat fundraiser appear after.
Well, I just, that's why I crossed it off, because it was after the fact.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, there were two there that were after the fact, yes.
That's nice of me.
Vice President Ruggiero?
Just thank you for mentioning the Cash for Gas raffle for the Winthrop Council on Aging. Very worthy cause for a very worthy organization.
All right, seeing no other items on the agenda, do I have a motion for adjournment? Motion by Councilor Belcher. Second by Councilor Fusillo. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Meeting adjourned.